You're putting that right team in place. You've chosen that team for a reason. If you're implementing AI, it should be to add rocket fuel to that organization, not necessarily to replace people.
Welcome to the X Factor, where we visit with proven private equity leaders to unpack a compelling area of value creation to help our listeners gain an edge as they grind toward a liquidity event of their own. X Factor is presented by Private Equity CXO, the world's largest digital community of PE-backed executives. You can find a link to PECXO in the description to start your free membership and unlock exclusive content.
We have a unique episode for you today. My name is Christy Smith, VP of Search at Falcon, and I'm guest hosting X Factor this week. We are excited to get into today's topic on how technology can fuel value creation in your PE-backed company. I'm joined by three tech-focused panelists today: Jeremy Smith, CTO of SureLink; Jay Webster, Board Advisor and founder of ActiveLab; and Kurt Stein, President of DCT Strategy, Inc. Welcome, panelists. Thank you, X Factor, for having us on today's show, and let's get into it. We'll start with discussing how to align technology strategy within private equity, then dive into driving product innovation. Lastly, we'll discuss how to maximize the value of technology within your portfolio company. We'll also have time at the end for questions. Starting with our first topic, aligning technology strategy within a PE-backed business, we'll kick off with Jay. How do you align your technology roadmap with the value creation goals set by your PE partners?
I think one of the most important things to do when you're taking on a new initiative is to make sure that you understand the investment thesis of a private equity firm, right? Private equity comes in many different flavors. They have very different goals for the things that they acquire and run, or they buy and hold. They buy for a period of time and flip. So I think that's part of what has to be done right away. And then I think that there's a rush to create roadmaps and to do technology audits usually, and that's understandable. Usually there's pressure to do that as a new leader. But I think that, since none of us ever come into a totally cold situation, right? There was a going concern there that was acquired that employs, potentially hundreds, if not thousands of people. You do have to take the time to understand the team and the culture that you've stepped into. It's like one of my best friends, Mike Abbott, has been fond of saying for a very long time is that code is easy, people are hard. And so understanding the culture, the organization is really key to your success going forward. And I think that once you've understood those things, then really it really depends on the situation that you've stepped into, right? Is it a single product, single stack company that's looking to grow? Is it a roll up where you're dealing with lots of fragmentation and potentially need to introduce a lot of automation, or retire legacy is like the theme I know that Kurt and Jeremy probably love. You get a lot of that in PE acquired companies. I guess my message is you have to take the time, those first 100 days. You have to take the time to really do the analysis, the whole measure twice, cut once thing is very important, right? Because if you come in and make judgments too quickly, you're likely to find yourself, down a path that is not aligned with the investment thesis of the private equity firm. That has to be your North Star. And then everything kind of flows from there situationally.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Jeremy, would you mind sharing a bit more about some of the initial steps that you take to assess and drive growth potential when first joining a PE-backed business?
Absolutely. My answer will probably just underline some of the things that Jay just mentioned. So whether you're coming into, a new situation, being brought in as a leader, or your company is making that transition into a PE-backed firm, I think that there are similar values or similar structure to how you can approach sort of that assessment. I think the number one, it's absolutely key to understand the investment thesis, whether you're coming in from outside or whether you're joining the portfolio. Understanding sort of what your role is as a company and sort of how to, and that can help you structure sort of how you're gonna get there and make the assessments that you need to make internally. I'm a big fan of sort of the 30-90-180 plan structure. 100 days is also a really great structure as far as putting those kinds of plans together. But what I found again, whether you're coming in either scenario is sort of structuring that learning around sort of a learn, decide, execute cycle. And then iterating that over time has been really successful for me. To Jay's earlier point, there's no silver bullet other than just getting down and doing the work, getting to know the people involved and understanding the teams that you're working with, both the teams that you're working with and the products and technologies that are being used. My recommendation would be, as you're coming in, is get yourself into a place where you can sort of learn, decide, and do, and repeat that a couple of times pretty early. So whether that's deep diving with teams on their existing culture or processes, and looking for potentially some quick wins there, looking at the products and technologies, seeing if what they've got on the board and seeing if there are some quick wins there, but try to help the team move through those cycles, move through that cycle so that you can kind of assess things as they're going, as they exist on the ground today, and then find opportunities for those quick wins and move through that cycle. I think it's great to be hypothesis driven, sort of lead with an idea or come in with an idea or have an idea. But I think you need to let yourself be led by the data as you actually get through some of those learn, decide, do cycles.
Great, thank you. Kurt, let's get your perspective on what are some critical questions PE firms should ask about AI adoption within their portfolio companies or also within their fund itself.
It's important to step back and to understand really what's happening in the landscape of AI. Like first and foremost, you need to understand what's happening. So for instance, like you look at one of the announcements just yesterday, Google Willow just solved a computational problem in 5 minutes, which would have taken a supercomputer 10 septillion years, which I didn't even know that was a word as of yesterday.
I already ordered one for Christmas.
And then what's even more interesting, from looking from a business perspective on X, Sundar puts it on there. And then Elon Musk responds, wow. Sundar responds, hey, let's get one of those chips, in Starship. And his response is, we're going to make that happen. And then he adds a bunch more, information. So that's important to understand what's happening in the business, where things are going. Secondly, you take a look at what's happening too in business. So approximately 90% of startups right now are either AI first or AI adopting. And I think of Moneyball, if you remember that movie with Brad Pitt. So the background was the Oakland Athletics. They had the smallest payroll. They were resource constrained. Let's think about business like this as well. And he learned that he should become data first. It existed prior to what he did it with, but he took advantage of it based on not having enough money and being resource constrained. He became a data first organization. And then it took off from there. And if you look at businesses, do businesses now become AI first in order to compete against the up and coming new starts, as well as some of the other competitors? So some of the questions that should be asked, and it goes back to what Jay said and Jeremy said, it's really understanding the strategy of the organization. What are you looking to do? Where are you looking to go in the future? What decisions do you need to make in order to take this path? AI is a technology. You don't just reinvent your entire business and just drop it in. You have to have a better understanding of where you're going in the business and where it's going to fit. Second part is companies have to look at their data quality and then their infrastructure. And in most companies, they haven't focused on the data quality. And with AI, data is extremely important. You have to feed the model with the correct data. Otherwise, you have to go to the outside market and spend a fortune in order to feed models, et cetera. So companies need to have a better understanding of what they're doing on the data side. Then you have to look at governance and risk. Are they ready for it? Do they have the governance and risk policies in place? Are they ready to add this technology in there? Do they need to gatekeep what AI sees or what AI does? And then lastly, do they have the operational or the talent in the organization in order to start working with it? Because the biggest challenge, and I think Jay said a little bit earlier, Jeremy, about people in an organization, change is very difficult. And just because you're going to add it doesn't mean people are going to adopt it. So you have to understand what is the level of the organization to be able to accept it. Will we be able to work with it? Are you ready for it? Do you need to work with an external partner?
Great, thank you. Let's transition to our next topic, product innovation. Jay, how do you go about prioritizing new products and features that align with both customer needs and PE sponsors' expectations?
Very carefully. Again, like just keeping in mind the investment thesis is PE firms typically look for returns like much more quickly than a venture capitalist, for example. The time horizon can be 2 to 3 years rather than 7 to 10 years. So you're operating in this like envelope, if you were, where it's very difficult to be a pure innovator, right? The environment is typically capital constrained. It is time constrained. And so it's really about, achieving that balance, innovation within those parameters. It requires a really close embrace, if you will, of your product marketing team, assuming that's where competitive intelligence lives. There may or may not be already customer feedback mechanism involved, like an advisory board, or even instrumentation in the product to determine what features are being used, or feedback from customers as to where they want to see the product or the platform go. So depending on which of those things exists, you may have to implement and run those things and gather intelligence before you make those decisions. But once made, with the right team in place, operating under that umbrella of time and capital constraint, that's really where the roadmap comes from, right? And you're just looking for, you can use established frameworks like RICE, I think is a popular one to do that. But all of that's kind of, to me, more of an organizational, like it's a good tool to organize your thoughts, to communicate up with your stakeholders, to maybe communicate horizontally, especially with the financial function. But ultimately it requires, that you have a competent leadership team and establish fairly short chunks of work like this. I can't remember Jeremy's turn of phrase, but analyze and do, and do over and over again. And then lastly, I'll just say, like, everything that you do has to be instrumented, right? So if your goal is margin expansion, or you want to increase the usership and growth, or you're having challenges with the retention, you're going to build features to address those particular goals. And before you put a feature into production, you've got to make sure that you have a plan to measure it. All of that's a long way of saying it's a complicated and dynamic equation. And I wish there were just like a framework to run it, but there isn't. This is why we are still engaged as leaders, because a lot of this stuff just takes a lot of experience, trial and error over many, many years in many different scenarios to basically be able to pick your way through.
Sure, absolutely. Jeremy, what are some top strategies that you've seen bolster product innovation in highly competitive markets?
Building a little bit on what Jay said, if there was a silver bullet, everybody would use it. But any situation that you're coming into is going to be a little dynamic. You may have some of the metrics that you need, you may have some of the information that you need, and you may have to go out and find some of that, whether that's building in the product instrumentation that you may need in order to solve that, or maybe it's just figuring out where your bottlenecks are in order to expand support for usability on any particular platform that you're working on. But I think that for me, like what I've seen from a product and innovation standpoint that really helps accelerate it is coalescing all of that information. It comes down to understanding your clients and their needs. What are the problems that you're trying to solve? There's no quick route there. You need to understand your clients. You need to understand what their needs are and what the market is that you're serving. And that could be a variety of different ways, whether that's interviews and product discovery from a product discovery function. It could be, interactions with clients, in a variety of scenarios, whether that's cabs like Jay mentioned, or events, or, more structured events with your product teams. Or frankly, like it could be your clients yelling at you on with customer issues or calls. Like that's information, that's signal that you can use in order to help you solve the problem. They're telling you what their needs are. It's up to you to help the organization sort of rally around that and come up with solutions for that. That's absolutely key. I think it kind of goes back to this sort of learn, decide, do model as well. Is like you need to create some space for yourself as a leader and for your teams so that they can then solve those problems and enhance. And as you understand the need, then create the space so that your team can iterate and field potential solutions and learn quickly. I think the only other thing that I would mention is, and it's really related to understanding your client, is don't ignore your competitors, but understand what your client needs are. What are the things that they're solving that you're potentially not? You're definitely not the only one with good ideas. And if you're coming into a business that's been in flight for a long time, there's going to be a lot of great ideas inside of that organizations. You need to mine some of that stuff out. Always with the context, as Jay mentioned, that, hey, you have an envelope here of some number of years that you're really trying to hit. So look at the problems that you can solve in the timeframes that you're going to be able to solve it in order to set your teams and the company up for its next step in the cycle, because that'll ultimately help drive, valuation for your PE-backed firm.
This question is for you and Jay as well. So we'll kick off with Jay, but what challenges have you faced in scaling technology to help support kind of rapid growth or high expectations set by a sponsor?
So I'll reference one thing Jeremy said, which is what does your client want or need? Well, who is your client? Is your client your owner, the PE firm, or is your client your customer? The answer, of course, is both. That's a challenge, like balancing the user experience, the development of the product, any sort of effort toward innovation with, again, the PE investment thesis. And then, as I mentioned before, I think that the biggest challenges that are recurring is, number one, capital constrained. So typically there's an effort to expand margin or EBITDA. One of those bottom line metrics, PE is particularly fond of below the line metrics, while at the same time trying to grow the top line. And that's not often a solvable challenge unless you've really tapped into something that grows organically and it's just an unusual situation. And then there is always the pressure of time. And so if we were a venture-backed company, as I said before, we could look at a 7-10 year time horizon. Typically, those investors are in it for the long haul. And you really are trying to push the envelope on innovation, look ahead of the market, and bring the next great thing to market that isn't necessarily even something that your customers know they want yet. Unless you're in a very dedicated PE firms like a Vista that just is laser focused on software, that can be a very difficult cultural change to sort of drive upward, right? That's typically an easier sell into the culture of the company that you're joining, because engineers, product people, everybody wants to have an impact. Everybody wants to build something new that they can be proud of. Everybody wants to eject legacy and get on with it. But the challenge to me is always capital and time.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that the one thing I would add onto that is there's a reason that in PE-backed firms you get involved with sort of inorganic growth as well, and just through acquisitions and additions or roll-ups from an overall growth strategy standpoint, and that can be super accretive. That I think making sure that you're involved in that side of the business and making sure that during diligence cycles and during sort of reviews that you're bringing to the table sort of your knowledge and your perspective on how you could potentially take this new technology or this competitive technology or this collaborative technology or company, and how you could potentially build along with that, or how that adds value to the products and services that you're currently offering, and basically help drive some innovation in the space from that standpoint. So there's no easy way to do this. It's just about doing the work, trying to do your homework, and then making sure that you stay aligned sort of top to bottom, with everything from the board down to your engineers.
And moving on to the AI side of things, Kurt, what role could AI play in speeding up product development lifecycle from ideation through the go-to-market phase?
Yeah, and that's active today, and there's a lot of generative AI that's available, and I'm pretty sure some companies have already taken advantage of it, probably in the PE side as well. So there's a lot of tools out there: GPT, Perplexity, U.com, etc. That's what they love. That's what they love to push out there. So you can literally write in there and prompt it to say, act as a product development manager. Here's the idea, lay out a roadmap of this product over this amount of time, based on this criteria. You just have to prompt it enough to really have a deep impact, and it will respond to you, and it'll provide you with that information. So that's on the generative AI for ideation, product development, enhancements. And then you have AI, the levels of computer vision that can help you with predictive analysis on products that you're working on. If you're trying to roll something out into a manufacturing facility and you're trying to get, best of class or look at pose estimation, you can utilize AI from that perspective and really dial in what things are going to be before you put it into full production. So that's one of the areas that people are usually taking advantage of, because it's not in production just yet. It's all that knowledge beforehand in order to get you to a certain point. I do speak with a lot of smaller businesses as well. And some of them, this part has been critical to them competing with the much larger companies, because they're able to fast track their ideas and their product development and their go to market at a much faster speed because of resource constraints, like which I mentioned a little bit earlier. That's where AI is really going to help in some of the smaller and mid-sized companies. So definitely a great area for people to utilize AI and to really start working with it to see what the outputs are and really start developing from that aspect.
Great insights. Thanks. Let's move on to our last topic, how to maximize the value of technology. Jay, how do you go about defining and measuring value creation in your role as a CTO within a PE-backed organization?
When you're part of the C-suite, you are accountable directly for the financial goals of the company. The further you get from it, the less that is true. I think that, trying like bifurcating my goals versus the goals of the management team, that doesn't really work, right? And so my last experience was in SaaS. And so my metrics that I lived and died by were ARR, GRR, and NRR. And everything that I was doing from a product strategy point of view had to impact one of those metrics. We were trying to upsell, we were trying to retain, we were trying to grow. And so ultimately, everything that you are doing rolls up into one of those metrics. It's necessary to have the more fine-grained metrics within the individual functions, within product, within engineering, or especially operations or customer success, to determine where you need to apply effort to improve those top-level metrics. But ultimately, that's where our work is reflected, and that's where it's most important. If you aren't moving one of those in a SaaS business, of course, in e-commerce or subscription-based, there are different metrics for conversion rates, et cetera. You really need to be contributing mightily to the top-level financial metrics that have been agreed by the management team, because those have been agreed, with your operating council at the private equity firm, and that's ultimately what's going to determine whether you're on track or not. My home is in the financial metrics, and over the course of my career, I've just taken, a lot of time to make sure that I'm deeply schooled, as it were, in those metrics. That's not my educational background, and so I put a lot of effort to make sure that I can communicate with my CFO and stay aligned with those financial metrics.
Great, thank you. And Jeremy, could you share some examples of technology and product initiatives that have had direct impact on company valuation?
I think Jay makes a really good point around staying aligned with the financial metrics. And, I think that the impact of any product or technology decision that you make, or any initiative that you do, is really around, driving the most important metrics for the company and for your private equity partner. And there's really two mechanisms, you have sort of two big levers to do that. That's organic, initiatives, organic innovation internally to help you drive that, or through acquisition. So I'll give you a couple of different examples that I've seen, mostly in SaaS businesses that I've been involved with. But on the organic side, because of that envelope or that window, what you're doing is you're helping the firm sort of get to its next, whatever its next phase of growth is. And it's not sexy, but you can't forget about scale and building for the next level of scale, for example, in a SaaS organization. So I've seen that be a real driver for valuation, being able to move orders of magnitude in the number of companies or users or whatever your metrics are as far as like usage on your platform, but being able to invest the time in order to support that next level of growth, I think can be a really powerful driver has been a real powerful driver for valuation. Ultimately, it's the grand bargain of SaaS in general is that people are renting your solution, but they expect it to get better over time, and to grow with them and their needs. So you need to, invest in that. On the acquisition front, it's a natural part of every private equity firm that I've been involved with, is that you're just going to have that generally as a part of what you do. And I think that as a product and technology leader, you should embrace that. Like, own that as a strategy to help you achieve the financial results that the company is trying to grow. So, whether that's sort of back end and growing your breadth and depth of some of your bench, product and technology features, adding, sort of a companion set of capabilities to your solution. Acquisition can be a really strong part. I've seen acquisition be a really strong part of that, but you need to embrace it as part of what you do, whether that's integration or a straight lift and shift into your own platform. There's a variety of reasons that you acquire a company, but helping make sure that that's successful, often falls to the product and technology leaders.
Mhm. And on the AI front, Kurt, in your experience, how have you seen companies utilize AI to help maximize the ROI of some of their existing technologies?
Yeah. So I would say first and foremost, in order to be successful with it, people need to be trained. They need to understand what AI is, how it works, et cetera. Some of the biggest pushback is the teams don't really understand how to use it. And some of the larger companies, great, you turn on Microsoft Copilot, but if somebody doesn't understand how to prompt it, they're not understanding how to utilize it within their business. They don't understand if the responses are accurate or not. Is there hallucinations, et cetera. You can get a lot of, pushback on that as well. And there are a lot of tools out there, which we're all seeing. A lot of companies that have AI, Salesforce with Agentforce, and Google's rolling out Gemini, and Microsoft with Copilot, and there's Oracle and their suite. It's everywhere. So you can turn it on and activate it. But the biggest thing is, availability does not mean utilization. So it goes back to my earlier point. You can make it available to people. You can utilize some of these AI tools, but if people don't know how to use them, then it sits on a shelf. It's not utilized. And then people say, why'd you waste this money? I'm not seeing a return on my investment, which we do see. If people are not using it, don't understand it, it goes nowhere. And also, turning on AI doesn't mean you get an ROI either. It's, again, people need to understand how to utilize it within the business in order to get the response that they're looking for. So some areas that companies have gotten success in are automation, of processes. So things that are done repetitive amount of times, it's how to build either copilots or putting AI in place in order to do it. Like one example would be at the end of the year, most people are writing the performance of what happened over the year with each of the employees. Now, we know that's going to take up a lot of time in an organization, in a company. They want to get it right, but it takes probably a day, 2 days, depending upon who's being managed, how many people are on the team. That's a tremendous amount of productivity loss in the business if you're spending a lot of time on that. Can you put AI into the business to help with writing performance reviews on employees, and then reviewing it and making sure it's correct before you obviously sit down with them? One other thing is in education, the companies are utilizing Google, Notebook LM. So professors are taking their notes and putting it into engaging podcasts or into audio to have that respond. And they're getting great engagement from their students. Because as you remember, you got to look at the different generations now. So we're looking at Generation Z up and coming, right? And they are expecting a certain thing in business and education as they've grown up with AI. So they're going to expect certain ways for things to be communicated to them. So professors are taking advantage of Notebook LM. Then you look at PDF processing in healthcare. You get a lot of bills in PDF, et cetera. And there's a tremendous amount of people have to go through these PDFs and look at them. Well, you have PDF pre-processing and make sure that document is correct and accurate. Does it get fed into the system? And now does AI now read it and provide a response, which cuts down on the amount of hours that somebody has to spend on that. The end result should be customer satisfaction, as well as increase in revenues if you could turn a bill around quicker and you understand all the information. And then lastly, I mentioned a little bit earlier, computer vision. So you can add that into some of the security cameras. We've built a pipeline that's agnostic on some of the security cameras. So you can look at that from a lot of manufacturers are putting it there to detect faults, detect problems and issues on their line. Look at pose estimation. Look at how people are positioned in their body. Are they doing something wrong? Is it going to hurt them? Are they going to lose an employee in the workforce because they hurt themselves when they did something they shouldn't do? So a lot of companies are using computer vision right now, and it's being rolled out pretty actively. So those are probably 4 or 5 examples of what's being done. But more critical for businesses, if the employees don't understand how to utilize AI and how it works within the business, they're not going to adopt it. You're not going to have the success there, and you're going to look at it as a wasted investment.
Great insights. Thanks, Kirk. Now we'll take some questions from the audience. And since you're in the seat, Kirk, we'll start with you. What is the right framework for assessing a potential industry, determining whether Gen AI will be a net positive or a negative to that industry?
Sure. So we have an understanding of each of the industries, and there's a lot of information available out there that is spoken to a lot of different industries, right? Microsoft, a lot of consulting firms, et cetera. So we have an overall understanding of speaking with our clients, as well as what surveys are being done across the industries themselves of what the biggest impacts are. But what I would always say, and I think it was mentioned a bit earlier, Jeremy and Jay, when you talk about getting into a business first, you have to understand what the business wants to do. They mentioned it around, how do you want to grow the business? What are you looking for from a financial standpoint? We look at AI strategy and readiness. So really stepping back into what are you looking to do? Anybody can come in and just say, "Oh, go implement this generative AI solution, and you can have a go-to-market product." And they turn around and say to you, "What are you talking about? I don't need help in go-to-market. I have an issue over here." So you can't just come in and just tell them what they're going to do. You have to have a better understanding of their business. So that's how we do it with the strategy and readiness assessment. We look at what is your strategy, where's your business, where are you looking to be in the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. We look at automation of processes. What are you doing repetitively, where your issues are. And then lastly, is your business even ready for this? Before you start spending money, do you have things that you need to do first in order to be ready for it? Otherwise, you've just, again, wasted another investment, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Right, thank you. And tossing it to Jay and Jeremy, kicking off with Jay, do you think PE firms are doing enough diligence to fully understand the tech environment they're acquiring, including tech debt, InfoSec? If not, what are some areas firms should be looking at or thinking about?
I would say that all of them are attempting to make their best effort. However, not all of them hit the mark, right? So there is a requirement in most cases, for example, that you engage a third party to do an independent audit and assessment of technology that's part of anything that you might be acquiring. The quality of those third party firms is highly variable. I have come into situations where I've read the third party assessment, and it was just complete boilerplate garbage. And it had nothing to do with what the company had actually bought. And so I think that probably the best thing that a PE firm could do would be to act more as a principal and make sure that they have on the bench as operating partners or people who work in the PortCos, a very talented set of individuals who can do the first line set of diligence for the PE firm. It won't obviate the need for that third party. That's usually a requirement by the within the regulatory framework. But I think that to have less of a figurehead political kind of CIO position, have an actual in the weeds CIO, CTO, head of product, a CISO, and actually deploy these people into evaluation of deals so that you have some firsthand responsibility for what it is that you're buying.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I think that, I think in my experience, my experience is actually very similar. So that sometimes that evaluation is super useful, and sometimes it's just, it was literally a tick the box moment for that third party firm. Just to build a little bit on that, I think that it's a skill that you can build, whether you're on the PE side or you're in one of the portcos, and doing evaluations potentially on acquisitions that they're going to do, and roll potential companies together. It's a skill. It's a skill that you absolutely need to develop as a leader, I think, and that's being able to understand, quickly assess, sort of what the business is and what it's trying to accomplish, and then look at the technology, products and technologies that it's built, and what those things have been built from, in order to assess, sort of relevance and finding out any potential issues or problems, or, things of that nature. So I think that you've got to, it's a skill and it's a muscle that I think that every technology and product leader should develop.
Great, thank you. And Kirk, would you mind commenting on the importance of data integrity and accuracy as it relates to adopting AI within your organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. It's critical. That goes back to what I said earlier about data within the company itself. And you have to spend time to make sure that it's clean, it's the accurate data as well. So a lot of companies they think they're ready, and they have to step back and say, let me take a closer look to what I have here. Because garbage in, garbage out. That is a saying for a reason, and that's what would happen on that side. So integrity and accuracy is important, because so you go back to the go-to-market. If your accuracy is not correct, you're going to have a plan of go-to-market that's going to fail for you. So that has always been the biggest complaint for people over time, is like, I don't know if I can trust this. The models are becoming better. When it's your data, you also have to spend time and have somebody on the team making sure that information is correct as well. So as Jay and Jeremy mentioned, you do have to have internal teams that are looking at it. You have to have processes and procedures in place from a governance perspective to make sure that things are accurate in the outputs. You're testing it. You're making sure you're updating maybe your models with new data within your business, and making sure, again, it's accurate, because whatever it is that you're doing, it's a representation of your company outward. So we've seen a lot of companies, once they get it right, they make sure they're constantly testing that and testing their models going forward.
Right, thank you. And taking it back to Jay and Jeremy, the focus for value creation was mostly on quantitative measures. Do either of you have any insights on the qualitative side of maximizing value creation within a business, and how to marry it with the quantitative side, and maybe ideas on how to measure it as well?
I think that you can actually marry that question with a couple of the others about comp ranges and the importance of culture, right? The qualitative side, like I said before, people are hard, code is easy, right? When you step into these environments, they're going concerns. There's a huge team of people. Usually half of them are pissed off about something, about being acquired, or the changes that were made after new management came in, or that their management team and their leaders were exited. And so you've really got to take the time to get a handle on your organization. The more that you can make it a place where people want to work, the more efficient you'll be. That will show up in employee retention, reduced recruiting cost. In my last two engagements, we were not able to pay market for R&D talent, but we had extremely high retention rates. And I put that down to my leadership team directly. The leaders I chose to hire in engineering, and the culture that we worked to put into place, made it a place that people wanted to work, where they could have an impact, where they could practice their craft in amongst peers, that made it an enjoyable experience, even though, yeah, of course, like, we're all trying to achieve goals, we're all working on deadline, but whatever, this is the career that we have chosen. The more that you invest in culture, the more margin expansion, the more efficient, the more you're going to be able to get out of your team. And so I think that those are it. equally as important, if not more important, is the investment in developing a fantastic culture.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree that a big chunk of any leader's time, and I mean a big chunk of your time, is going to be working with and developing the teams and the culture and the environment that people work in. Creating teams that punch above their weight from an overall execution standpoint is all about the time and investment you can make into those people, into helping them achieve their goals in their career, making sure that that's well aligned with the business, taking the time to understand what those are. Like that doesn't come through reading a spreadsheet. That comes with talking to people. That comes with doing those making sure that you're involved in those one-on-ones, in those skip level one-on-ones, sort of building a culture of trust so that then you can execute together. You can decide and execute together and quickly and rapidly iterate on things. So I think in general, from a qualitative standpoint, one of the things that I like to focus on either or when I'm coming into a company is exactly that, is spending time with the in-place leadership team and the in-place teams to sort of understand what things are absolutely key to helping them execute, and then building on top of those over time, making it an environment where they can be successful, and that success will translate into the success that your private equity firm is looking for.
Right, thank you. And kicking it back to Kurt, how do you see the inclusion of AI in the product development lifecycle potentially affecting labor in this space while accelerating the development process? Some could assume it could drive down labor costs for some roles while requiring more high-end roles to manage AI design and architecture. Do you have any insight on that front?
It's a great question. Many people have been pontificating on that. I've heard many different views. I have my own views as well. I think in the beginning, it is a workforce enhancement. I think what Jay said and what Jeremy said around building that culture too. You're putting that right team in place. You've chosen that team for a reason. If you're implementing AI, it should be to add rocket fuel to that organization, not necessarily to replace people. And it's also going to create new roles. Right now, we have the chief AI officer. Maybe Jeremy's busy with, other aspects of infrastructure and that part of it. So look, let him focus on this core area. It depends on certain businesses. It's going to focus on the folks that are looking at data integrity, right? What is the model doing? Are they testing it and making sure that it's getting the performance they want over time? Is now the security team stretched thin because now you've added governance and risk from the AI side onto everything else that they have to do within the business, right? You've now split them up so much more that something is going to crack if you do that. So I think it's different in every organization. If you have an organization where, like I read something recently and I was pretty surprised by it. In the software engineering side, they believe that there was a high percentage of software engineers that aren't working. And I was like, really? And it came from a pretty reputable source. And I was like, if that's the case, those people will eventually be replaced because AI, depending on how you use it, might flush, certain areas that aren't being productive out, and the leaders of the organization will be able to see it. But I can think that if Jay and Jeremy are implementing culture and putting the right people in place, it should be rocket fuel to an organization. And that should be the case across the board. But more importantly, it is what I said earlier, the people have to learn how to utilize this. I mean, they mentioned it as well about education in the workforce. It's got to be in technology as well. How to use AI, not to be fearful of it, how it works for the organization. What's the goal of the organization? Why would they be implementing it? Where are they looking to go? What is the organization looking to do? How is AI going to get them there? How is it going to help them in what they're doing every day? And that communication should alleviate some of that fear of people thinking that, well, if it gets implemented, then why do they need me? Well, if they understand that, no, we're trying to make the organization better by utilizing this to help you, that might hit off some of those fears. But that's how I look at it. I think there should be a positive.
Great. Thank you. Well, that is all the time we have today. Thanks so much to our audience for joining us and for your great questions. Huge thanks to Jay, Jeremy, and Kurt for your insights and volunteering to be our panelists today. As a final reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available on privateequitycxo.com. And thanks, everybody.
Be sure to tune in to our next episode. I'm your host, Rob Huxtable, and thank you for listening to The X Factor.